My family made fun of me and berated me, comparing me to my sister my entire life. But now, they're begging me to invite them to my wedding because I'm marrying someone wealthy. I was almost ready to give in until my aunt revealed something. I am 23 years old and was born into a middle-class family, consisting of my parents and my older sister, Kelly, who is 25. My parents were academics, so it was obvious they had great expectations for Kelly and me. Kelly was an exceptionally bright student and looked like a Greek goddess. On the other hand, I wasn't very gifted in school, wasn't as appealing, and was overweight. But I was very good at art from a young age. Anyone who claims that appearance doesn't matter in society has never truly been considered unattractive, because I faced discrimination because of it, even from my own family. I found it acceptable for my parents to reprimand me for my studies because I understood the reason, but they always ended up commenting on my appearance, saying I couldn't even succeed at being a ditzy blonde if I was failing at everything else, constantly comparing me to Kelly. Kelly didn't say much, but I felt her eyes on me every time we walked to school together, as if she wanted to vanish rather than be seen with me. Even when we were children, at all family events, as soon as relatives tried to congratulate me on my achievements, my parents always intervened, making jokes about my appearance and comparing my face to animals. This caused awkward laughter, because it was others, but the harm they were inflicting on me was irreparable. I always thought it was my fault for being unattractive, which led to a severe inferiority complex. I rarely spoke to anyone and didn't participate in school activities, for fear of being judged. One day, the school counselor saw me sitting alone in a classroom drawing and suggested I participate in the upcoming poster contest. I declined, and she decided to find out more by talking to me. She discovered my problems and called my parents. The same day, asking them to take me to a psychologist because their constant criticism wasn't helping. To avoid appearing neglectful, they agreed to enroll me in therapy. The following years were improved. I finally began to build my self-confidence with the help of my therapist. However, this did not alter the sarcastic remarks I received from my parents. They mocked my appearance, and when I showed my disagreement, they said I needed a sense of humor. So, I decided I would leave home when I turned 18. When my 18th birthday arrived, my parents didn't forget to focus everything on Kelly. Kelly got a job as a model. Kelly was admitted to a prestigious university. Kelly was the best, was all I heard at the party. Only my maternal aunt stood up and reminded everyone that it was my birthday and that we should perhaps talk about me instead of Kelly. Everyone agreed, except my parents, who disliked my aunt's intervention and remained silent for the rest of the party, even when it was time to sing happy birthday. After the party, I went up to my room to cry. The next day, I called a friend who helped me find a small apartment. I had saved money from my part-time job, so finances were not an issue. My departure did not bother my family. I didn't need to ask why. I don't even think they realized I was leaving for good until I started loading the boxes into my friend's car. They didn't say much, just a final observation that their house would finally look more beautiful without me. Kelly, surprisingly, offered me a book she loved as a farewell gift. That year, I studied and worked very hard. I discovered my passion for software engineering and, fortunately, was admitted to a renowned university. Since I hadn't spoken to my parents since my departure, I decided to visit them to invite them to my graduation ceremony. When I arrived at their house, I found the door locked. I called them, and after several attempts, they finally answered, saying they couldn't attend my graduation ceremony because they were abroad on vacation. I thought they might change their minds after learning of my admission and offer to pay my tuition fees as they had done for Kelly, but all I got was, "Oh, that's great. I'm happy for you." I hung up and went straight to my aunt's house to invite her to my graduation instead. There, we talked, and I cried a little about my family's distant behavior, and she promised to be there for me. From there, I moved to another city to attend university. 6 years later, I worked for a well-known company as a software engineer and did graphic design work as a freelancer. My relationship with my family had been almost non-existent during these years. I only received invitations to major family events, just to be ridiculed most of the time, so I decided to stop going. After a year, my aunt noticed this and invited me to her house for all the holidays, so we can say I didn't miss my family. The company where I worked hard was very relaxed, with no clear hierarchy among employees. One day, our company needed someone to redesign its logo, so I volunteered. They asked me to work with a guy from the office whom I had never met before. Let's call him Rob. Rob and I worked on the project for almost 3 months and became very good friends. We started going out after work, realized there was something more, and finally began dating. At the end of the project, I found out later that he was actually the CEO and founder of the company. But that didn't change much for me because, to me, he was just Rob. After a year of relationship, he finally proposed extravagantly during a trip to Paris. I was overjoyed, and my aunt was the first to be informed. The next day, I emailed my family to inform them and posted on Facebook to let my extended family know. To my great surprise, I received a call from my mother for the first time in almost 7 years. She seemed very enthusiastic, congratulated me, and invited me to a private family dinner the following weekend. I thought about it and accepted. The dinner wasn't at home. We went to a very fancy restaurant. I met my parents and my sister Kelly, who had been unemployed since she graduated from university. My parents tried to be very nice to me, but I remained on guard. They asked me questions about the wedding, and I told them I didn't have any plans yet. That's when they showed their true colors, and I finally understood why they wanted to see me. They started begging me to include them in my wedding. I was shocked and told them clearly that it would be my decision and that they had no right to make requests after an absence of almost 7 years, only appearing when they needed something. They remained silent, and I asked for the bill. I thought we were going to share it, but I was informed they expected me to pay the whole thing because I was now going to marry a rich man. I was so upset at that moment that I paid the bill and left without even saying goodbye. I told Rob all about this, and he assured me that the wedding would be exactly as I wanted, only with people I wanted by my side that day. From that day on, I started receiving incessant calls from my parents, pressuring me to invite them and include them in the wedding because family comes first, and other arguments of that sort. At first, I was extremely reluctant because of what happened during the last dinner. But after their repeated apologies for their behavior towards me during my childhood and until now, I decided to act like a responsible adult and give them a second chance. I told them that my father could walk me down the aisle, while my mother and Kelly would be my bridesmaids, and they were more than delighted. Things started to go wrong when they began shopping for the wedding. They bought the most expensive items from the stores and expected me to pay for everything. I was very clear with them, stating I would send references for them to consult, but I would not pay for anything. They tried to convince me by pretending to be nice, but I wasn't a fool and refused. 5 months before the wedding, Rob and I decided to organize an initial engagement announcement party in my city and establish the guest list based on that. I invited my family and many of my relatives to this engagement party. It was well known that since Rob was the CEO, many prestigious guests would be present at all events. My parents were very pleased to be included at this stage. Everything was going as planned until I received a call from my aunt, who told me she wanted to talk to me in person as soon as possible. I saw her in the following days, and she told me that my family was preparing something against me. She explained that my mother knew very well that I disliked both her and Kelly, and that she planned to create a scene at my engagement party. Their finances had deteriorated after paying for Kelly's education because my father retired. My mother was the sole provider for the family's needs, and with Kelly doing nothing since university, they were not financially well off. When they realized I was engaged to a rich man, they tried to reconcile with me, hoping I would automatically become their ATM and give them money. But after I rejected their efforts, they planned something more devious. Their first plan was to make Kelly my maid of honor so she could be associated with one of the groomsmen. This seemed unrealistic because I did not let myself be manipulated and had control over my wedding. So, they decided on a more disloyal plan. They had bought a cheap necklace online that they were planning to show me at the engagement party, claiming it was a family heirloom for Kelly. Once they had seen me with the necklace, she would secretly place it in my purse and create a scene, pretending the necklace was stolen. After finding it in my purse, she would accuse me of theft in front of everyone, and as compensation, perhaps my fiancé would give them money out of guilt and I would pay their expenses. My aunt calmed me down and said she had come to see me as soon as she learned of this plan to warn me of my family's intentions at the party, and she asked me what action I wanted to take. I thought for a while and asked my aunt not to let them know that I was aware because I was now planning to teach them a lesson. I told my aunt that we could get another copy of the necklace and place it in my mother's purse after she placed her necklace in mine. Their embarrassment would be limitless after finding a necklace she accused me of stealing in her own bag. Perhaps this would make them think twice before scheming to humiliate me. My aunt approved the plan and immediately agreed. On the day of my engagement party, everything was going as planned. My mother showed me the necklace, and a few minutes later, she gathered my father and Kelly and started shouting that her expensive necklace had disappeared. I looked in my purse and immediately gave the necklace discreetly to my aunt. Then, I went to see my mother and asked her what was wrong. She blamed the disappearance of the necklace and wanted me to check my purse. I pretended to remain calm and asked her to check her own purse before blaming anyone. She did, and I took her purse. I opened it and showed the necklace to everyone. My family was astonished, everyone now whispering about the matter. Before she could say anything, I reminded her loudly that her tactic of making me responsible for all the problems she caused when I was young would not work anymore. I added that, although I might not be as pretty, I had much higher values than theirs, and that is what matters in the real world. They remained silent for the rest of the party and left early, thoroughly embarrassed. The next day, I saw several voice messages on my phone from my parents and some family members saying that I shouldn't have brought up the past after their repeated attempts at reconciliation with me. They claimed that accusing me of the necklace was unintentional, but that my attack on their character was extremely out of place. So, I am the bad one for voluntarily questioning my family's character after they tried to tarnish my reputation during my engagement party? Thank you to everyone who shared their opinions and gave advice on my situation. I showed this post and the comments to my aunt, and she suggested that I speak with them honestly if I genuinely wanted to give our relationship a fair chance. This seemed like a good idea to me. So, a week after the engagement party, I went to my parents' house for dinner. They had not contacted me after I gave no response to their accusations that I had embarrassed them. The atmosphere was quite cold when I arrived, and they barely spoke unless I initiated a conversation. I had them sit down and told them how I had discovered their plan. Their silence was not arrogance, but they didn't have much to say. I allowed myself to release all the resentment I had accumulated since my childhood in an honest attempt to understand their perspective and rebuild our relationship. To my great surprise, they were extremely understanding and apologized profusely for what they tried to do at my engagement party. The apology seemed sincere, but I couldn't completely trust them after the party fiasco. As the wedding was approaching, I went to the store to see my dress and make the final adjustments. I had already planned to go with my aunt, but I decided to take my mother and Kelly there as well, to try to build new connections. A detail I forgot to mention. I had actually lost a lot of weight during my studies, so I was no longer considered unattractive, or at least I hadn't been until now. During the dress fitting, my aunt was moved when she saw me in the dress, but my mother and Kelly had extremely neutral reactions. I tried to ask them if they wanted to add anything to the ensemble, and they responded no. So I took off the dress, and suddenly Kelly approached me with a luxurious satin dress, suggesting it should be the bridesmaid's dress. It was a very beautiful dress, but when she saw the price, she said she couldn't afford it, even with the discount. I didn't offer to pay for it at that moment, but I decided to buy it later for my mother and sister since she was part of my wedding procession, and we all left. The next day, I bought the dresses and gave them as gifts a few days after our visit. My family started to impose small details for the wedding, such as the guest list, flower colors, or the events to organize. It was a bit strange at first, but I held firm and told them that I would ask their opinion directly if I needed it. They may not have liked that because what followed was an absolute disaster. About an hour after they left my house, I received a call from my mother. I answered, and after hearing no response, I realized that she might have called by mistake. She and Kelly were at a bar, and when I was about to hang up, I heard them talking about me. My mother mocked my wedding dress, saying that I could never wear anything like it, and was surprised at how well I managed to seduce such a handsome and rich man, while she wouldn't even hire me as a housekeeper in his house. She continued to ridicule me, calling me pretentious, and hoped that she could access my wealth without ever having to see me again. I had heard enough, so I hung up and had a nervous breakdown shortly thereafter. I couldn't believe how cruel my mother and Kelly could be. The next day, I called my aunt and told her everything. She came to my house, comforted me, and reminded me that I had the power in this situation and that she would always be on my side, no matter what happened. Fortunately, my phone recorder was activated during this call, so I had proof of their conversation just in case they tried to deny it. Now I have to make difficult decisions, and not without appropriate revenge. I think everyone was right when they told me that I should have cut ties with my family when they attacked me at my engagement party. Now I am following this advice, with some personal adjustments. What followed after the last update was a disaster. After careful consideration, I decided not to include my mother and Kelly in the wedding procession, but I still wanted to know my father's position on all of this. I called him and met him that day while my mother and Kelly were shopping. I told him everything about what happened at the store and on the call, but instead of supporting me, he started to remind me not to forget my place. Furious, I asked him what he meant, and he replied that he was fed up with me beating around the bush, begging for financial help when I should have offered it as soon as I knew about their situation. I told him that he should have asked directly, and that if he expected me to guess what he was going through without him saying a word, perhaps he should have tried to build a relationship instead of making fun of me in family conversations and constantly comparing me to Kelly. He said that I had to remember that he had raised me until I was 18, and that I shouldn't forget that they were the reason I was where I am today. I was horrified by this statement and finally realized that this family was not my priority. They traumatized and marginalized me throughout my childhood, and then they came running back like dogs when they smelled money. I said nothing more and left. I didn't receive any calls from my family for the next 2 days, which meant that my father hadn't told my mother about our conversation, nor Kelly, and I finally had time to develop a plan to expose them. In consultation with Rob and my aunt, I developed a plan to organize a bachelorette party, inviting only my aunt, my mother, and Kelly. I organized the party in a private venue, secretly installing hidden cameras and asking them to play truth or dare with me. During the game, I was planning to ask them questions about what they said during the call to expose their hypocrisy if they lied, or reveal the truth if they didn't. The following weekend, the bachelorette party was held. My mother and Kelly were extremely excited because everything was fully paid for, and they behaved very kindly towards me, which meant they didn't know that I knew everything. So, I started to ask them questions with my aunt sitting beside me as a witness. The first questions were unsettling, but as soon as they realized that what I was asking was about a private conversation between them, they quickly recovered and started to lie and try to change the subject. At the end of a moment when she didn't answer my questions directly, I took out my phone and played them the audio of their conversation. Together, they remained silent and then showed their true faces a few moments later. they started to criticize me, saying that I should never have had such a beautiful life, given that Kelly was the family prodigy. They claimed they knew I wasn't one of them since the day I was born, and that I proved it again by playing games instead of helping them financially. I told them they were recorded and that if they didn't want the video published on Facebook, they had to accept that they would no longer be part of my wedding. I also told them that, frankly, I wished I could completely uninvite them from the wedding, but that it might raise questions about our relationship, and I didn't want to draw attention to them. So I spared them the humiliation. I specified that once the wedding was over, I would never see them again. I reminded them not to associate with me to gain privileges in the future and to return the dresses I had offered them as soon as possible, or reimburse me for them. My mother and sister were furious and immediately called a taxi to leave. My aunt and I had the place to ourselves for the rest of the night and until the next day, so we took the opportunity to celebrate what seemed like a victory over my family. I asked my aunt if she wanted to walk me down the aisle instead of my father, which made her cry before she happily accepted. The wedding is in a month, and I am still waiting for Kelly to return the dresses because I know there is no way for her or my mother to reimburse me. I apologize for the delay in this update and thank everyone who congratulated me on my wedding. That is the reason for this delay. I thought things would calm down after warning my family to remain discreet until my wedding, but that's not what happened. A week after the bachelorette party, I still hadn't received the dresses I gave to my mother and Kelly. However, I didn't want to cause drama so close to the wedding, so I decided to take care of it later. Later that day, my aunt called me to ask me to look at Facebook. My entire family had turned against me, posting a long, cynical speech on Facebook, claiming that I had tortured them since childhood for money. They made up many stories and even mentioned mistakes from my childhood antics that children make, but which were presented as malicious simply because I was the one who did them. They concluded their post by asking for everyone's help because, supposedly, I had blackmailed them for money. My aunt left comments saying they were lying, but as expected, all comments in my favor were removed. Many people criticized my parents for discussing my childhood in such a shameful way, but their only response was that they had endured everything and didn't expect others to understand. They even went as far as publishing my phone number in their post, which resulted in many phone calls from relatives trying to convince me to invite them to my wedding. I showed the post to Rob, who suggested suing them for defamation and harassment, but I told him I didn't want to have anything more to do with them. I was furious and decided to publish the videos where they insulted and openly discriminated against me for being ugly, accompanied by my explanation. In my post, I specified that they would no longer be invited to the wedding and that they should reimburse me for the dresses I had offered them, or they would hear from my lawyers soon. Many people who had supported them initially quickly changed sides after seeing the video and started to attack them in turn. They thought I was bluffing when I said I would publish the videos and tried to intimidate me to get what they wanted, but I turned the tables, leaving them with no way out. They hadn't foreseen this and were now in a huge mess. I received messages from my maternal grandmother asking me to forgive them, but as soon as I told her that she was free not to come to the wedding if she wanted to support them, her opinion also changed. The following weeks were extremely stressful, but I had everything carefully planned, including hiring security for the wedding venue because I expected them to show up. And they did. My father was also exhausted from participating in this, so it was only my mother and Kelly who arrived wearing the dresses as if nothing had happened. When they were refused entry, they made a scene before important guests arrived. Rob went out to warn them to leave or face the police for trespassing on private property. Having no other choice, they decided to leave, but not before insulting me while I watched them from a window. The icing on the cake, as they were leaving, my mother accidentally stepped on a sprinkler that activated and ruined both her and Kelly's outfits. The wedding went smoothly after that, with my aunt walking me down the aisle. Most of the guests on my side apologized for my family's behavior. I asked everyone to forget this incident and enjoy the wedding, which they eventually did. This will be the final update on this incident. I received Kelly's and my mother's dresses by mail during my honeymoon. They were damaged due to the incident with the sprinkler, but it wasn't a matter of clothing, it was a matter of principle. Rob still insisted that I sue my family for having tried to defame me with their lies, but I refused because they had already discredited themselves sufficiently with the Facebook post. My true happiness lies in the fact that I no longer have a toxic family in my life. My aunt continues to be the person I trust deeply, and now that I am pregnant, perhaps she will be the only grandmother my child deserves. I haven't really heard much about my family, except that my father now has a drinking problem, that my mother always tries to slander me, and that Kelly left town to start over and tried to send me an apology message. Honestly, I don't care, because they are the ones who ruined our relationship for petty reasons, and now that I am happy, I don't want to disturb my peace with false apologies.